by the 7 moons of Kythara. I never thought I'd be writing a report like this. My name is Commander Vex Thornspike, and I've spent the last 40 cycles hunting prey across 17 different star systems. Let me tell you something about hunting. It's supposed to be predictable. You find a world, you assess the inhabitants, you strike, you feast. Simple, right? Well, apparently nobody told the humans that. 3 rotations ago, our war fleet detected a small blue planet orbiting a rather ordinary yellow star. The initial scans were laughable, honestly. The dominant species had barely figured out how to leave their own atmosphere without blowing themselves up. They were fighting each other with primitive chemical explosives and metal projectiles. My tactical officer, Sub-Commander Krex Voidclaw, actually snorted when he saw the data. "Commander, Band," he said, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "These creatures are so busy killing each other. They probably won't even notice us until we're already harvesting their cities." Oh, how wrong we were. How spectacularly, monumentally wrong. The Kytharan Empire had conquered 43 worlds before this one. We are apex predators, evolved on a death world where only the strongest, fastest, and most cunning survive. Our exoskeletons can deflect plasma fire, our claws can tear through reinforced steel, and our hunting instincts are honed by millions of years of evolution. We don't just defeat our enemies, we devour them, literally. But humans? Humans are different. They're soft, squishy, pathetically fragile creatures who die if you poke them too hard. They can't see in the dark, they can't smell fear from a kilometer away, and they certainly can't rip apart a hovering tank with their bare hands. By all logical standards, they should have been extinct before we even arrived. The first phase of our invasion went exactly as planned. We established a beachhead in what the humans called North America, specifically targeting a region they referred to as Montana. The logic was sound: sparse population, minimal military presence, and plenty of open terrain for our ground forces to operate. We deployed 3 full hunting battalions, roughly 12,000 of our finest warriors. Within 6 hours, we had secured a perimeter of 50 kilometers. The few human settlements we encountered were, well, let's just say they provided adequate nutrition for our advance scouts. Everything was proceeding normally until we received our first distress signal. "Commander," came the panicked voice of Hunt Leader Zex Bonecrusher, "we're under attack. They're everywhere." I leaned forward in my command throne, genuinely puzzled. "Impossible. Our reconnaissance showed no significant military presence in your sector. What are you facing?" "A dozen soldiers." "2 dozen? Negative, Commander. It's farmers, civilian farmers with hunting weapons. But they're fighting like seasoned warriors." I exchanged glances with Krex. Farmers? Fighting like warriors? This was either a joke or a sign that Bonecrusher had finally lost what little sanity he'd started with. "Clarify your situation, Hunt Leader." "Sir, they're using their knowledge of the terrain against us. They've set up ambush points in locations our scanners can't detect. One of them took out our heavy walker with some kind of improvised explosive device. They're not retreating. Commander, they're not even scared." The communication cut to static. We later learned that Hunt Leader Bonecrusher and his entire pack had been eliminated by a group of 17 humans armed with what they called hunting rifles and an apparently unlimited supply of creative curse words. This was unexpected, but not necessarily alarming. Every species has its fighters. We simply needed to adjust our tactics. Within 12 hours, we had lost contact with 2 more hunting battalions. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning, and they were doing it with weapons that shouldn't have been capable of penetrating our armor. I decided to personally investigate the situation, landing my personal dropship in the middle of what had been Hunt Leader Zex's last known position. I expected to find evidence of a massive battle, craters, destroyed vehicles, the usual signs of warfare. Instead, I found something far more disturbing. The landscape looked almost normal. There were no massive explosions, no evidence of heavy weaponry. Just small disturbances in the environment, carefully concealed positions, tracks that seemed to lead nowhere. And then I realized what I was seeing. These humans weren't fighting like civilians defending their homes. They were fighting like predators defending their territory. "Commander," Krex's voice crackled through my comm unit, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the humans' leadership." I clicked my mandibles in satisfaction. Finally, some sense. "Excellent. Prepare the harvest protocols, sir. You might want to hear this transmission yourself." The voice that came through our communication system was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying in its casualness. "This is General Marcus Kane of the United Earth Defense Force. We've received your demands for surrender, and we have a counterproposal." "A counterproposal?" I was intrigued despite myself. "This is Commander Vex Thornspike of the Kytharan Empire. State your terms, human. Simple. You leave our planet immediately, or we show you exactly why we've been fighting each other for 10,000 years. Consider our response to your initial attacks a gentle warning." I couldn't help but laugh. A genuine, deep-throated laugh that made my crew shift nervously. "Human, you've lost 3 battalions worth of warriors. You're facing an empire that has conquered 43 worlds. Your gentle warning has cost you thousands of lives." "Actually," the human said, and I could hear what I later learned was called amusement in his voice, "we've lost about 200 people. Your 3 battalions? They're all dead, in general. Those weren't even our military. Those were just our neighbors who got annoyed about the noise." The communication ended, and I stared at the silent comm unit for a long moment. 200 casualties. For 3 battalions of our finest warriors, that was impossible. It was about to get worse. Over the next rotation, something changed in the human response pattern. Instead of the disorganized resistance we'd been facing, we began encountering organized military units. And these units weren't just fighting with their primitive weapons. They were fighting with our weapons. Weapons they'd somehow reverse-engineered from the wreckage of our forces. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was how quickly they were adapting. Every tactic we employed, every strategy we'd used successfully on dozens of other worlds, the humans seemed to counter within hours, not days. Not weeks. Hours. Lieutenant Quake Shadowfang, one of our most experienced scouts, reported back from a reconnaissance mission with information that made my blood run cold. "Commander, they're not just adapting to our tactics. They're improving them." I watched a human squad set up an ambush using techniques that were clearly derived from our own hunting methods, but they'd modified them. We made them more effective. Made them more effective. Explain. "Disav, sir. They observed how we track prey by scent and sound. Then they created false trails that led our hunting packs into prepared kill zones. They're not just learning from us. They're learning better than us." I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. How does a species learn to fight better than creatures who've been perfecting warfare for millions of years? How does a soft, weak species adapt faster than apex predators? The answer came during what the humans later called the Battle of Yellowstone. I had committed our remaining forces to a massive assault on what appeared to be a major human stronghold. The plan was sound: overwhelming force, multiple attack vectors, complete tactical superiority. It should have been a slaughter. Instead, it became a masterclass in adaptive warfare. The humans had somehow predicted not just our attack, but our backup plans. Every contingency we'd prepared for, they'd already countered. Every weakness in their defenses that we'd identified was actually a trap. They'd turned their own vulnerabilities into advantages. But the real shock came when I saw the human soldiers up close. They weren't the same fearful, disorganized creatures we'd first encountered. In just a few days of warfare, they'd become something else entirely. Their movements were sharper, their tactics more refined, their instincts more predatory. One human soldier, a female named Captain Riley Martinez, actually managed to get within striking distance of my command position. She was wounded, bleeding, and armed with nothing but a combat knife and what appeared to be unshakable determination. When she looked at me, I saw something that made my exoskeleton shiver. She wasn't afraid of me. She was studying me, learning from me. Even as I prepared to end her life, she was analyzing my attack patterns. "You're not as fast as you think," she said. dodging a swipe from my primary claw. Your species relies too much on intimidation and brute force. You've never had to fight anything that could think its way around your advantages. I managed to wound her, but not before she'd demonstrated something impossible. She'd adapted to my fighting style in real time. Each of my attacks was slightly less effective than the last, as if she was learning to counter my natural advantages through pure observation. That night, as I reviewed the battle reports, I realized something that chilled me to my core. We weren't just losing this war, we were teaching the humans how to win it. Every engagement, every tactical exchange, every moment of combat was making them better at killing us. Sub-Commander Krex approached my command throne, his usual confidence replaced by something that might have been fear. "Commander, we're receiving reports from our orbital reconnaissance. The humans are... they're mobilizing." Define mobilizing, Sub-Commander, sir. Every nation on this planet has apparently set aside their conflicts to focus on us. They're sharing weapons technology, tactical information, even their most classified military secrets. It's as if they've decided that learning to kill us is more important than anything else they were doing. I studied the tactical display, watching as human military units moved across their planet with unprecedented coordination. These weren't the same fractured, competing factions we'd observed during our initial reconnaissance. This was a unified species, and they were all learning the same lesson: how to hunt predators. "Sir," Krex continued, "there's something else. Our intelligence suggests they're not just adapting to our current tactics. They're trying to anticipate our future strategies. They're simulating battles we haven't even fought yet." That's when I understood what we were truly facing. We weren't fighting a primitive species that was desperately trying to survive. We were fighting a species that had evolved to become more dangerous when threatened. Every challenge they faced made them stronger, smarter, more deadly. They called it learning from experience. We called it evolution in real time. The final engagement of what I now consider the first phase occurred 72 hours later. I had withdrawn our forces to a defensive position, hoping to regroup and reassess. The humans, however, had other plans. General Kane's voice came through our communications one final time. "Commander Thornspike, we appreciate the learning opportunity you've provided. Consider this our graduation exercise." What followed was not a battle. It was a systematic dismantling of everything we thought we knew about warfare. The humans had somehow obtained detailed intelligence about our command structure, our weapon systems, even our psychological profiles. They attacked not just our positions, but our assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. They used tactics that shouldn't have worked against our superior technology. They exploited weaknesses we didn't even know we had. They turned our own strengths against us with a precision that spoke of deep, intuitive understanding of predator behavior. As I watched my forces being systematically eliminated by creatures who had learned to fight better than we could in just a few days, I realized something that would haunt me for the rest of my existence. We hadn't invaded a world of prey. We had invaded a world of predators who had been pretending to be prey until something worthy of their attention finally arrived. The humans didn't just defend their planet, they taught us what real warfare looked like, and we were failing the lesson. As my command ship prepared for emergency retreat, I received one final transmission from the human military. It wasn't a threat or a demand for surrender, it was worse. "Mondin." "Thank you," General Kane said, and I could hear that terrifying calmness in his voice. "We've learned everything we need to know about interstellar warfare. We'll be visiting your home world soon. We have some improvements to suggest." The transmission ended, and I stared at the tactical display showing the complete destruction of our invasion force. 3 full battalions of apex predators, eliminated by a species that had never fought an interstellar war before this week. But somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. 6 months. That's how long the Kytharan High Command gave me to prepare our homeworld for what they insisted on calling impossible retaliation from a primitive species. 6 months to explain to the most arrogant military leadership in the galaxy that we were about to face something unprecedented. Supreme War Marshal Drac Irma, whose previous battlefield experience consisted mainly of crushing rebellions on agricultural worlds, listened to my report with the kind of patronizing amusement that made me want to remove his mandibles with my bare claws. "Commander Thornspike," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you're telling the Council that a species that hasn't mastered faster than light travel is planning to attack our homeworld? The same species that was fighting with chemical explosives 6 months ago?" "Yes, Marshal. And I'm telling you that underestimating them is exactly what got 12,000 of our finest warriors killed." 12,000 warriors defeated by farmers and factory workers, snorted War Counselor Hicks Deathbringer. "Perhaps the problem wasn't the humans' capabilities, but your leadership." I felt my combat instincts flare, but managed to keep my voice level. "Marshal, with respect, I've conquered 7 worlds for this empire. I know the difference between tactical failure and facing something completely outside our experience. What you faced," Supreme War Marshal Iron Maw declared, "was a species that got lucky. They had home field advantage, nothing more. When they arrive here, if they arrive here, they'll face the full might of the Kytharan military on our terms, in our space with our technology." The Council dismissed my warnings and began preparing for what they called the most amusing siege in Imperial history. They were so confident that they actually started selling viewing rights to the orbital platforms. Citizens could watch the primitive humans get obliterated from the comfort of their sky cities. I tried to warn them about the humans' adaptive capabilities, their terrifying ability to learn and improve under pressure. I showed them tactical recordings of human soldiers countering centuries-old Kytharan strategies in real time. I presented evidence of their rapid technological advancement, their unprecedented species-wide cooperation, their complete willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Nobody listened. 3 months into our preparations, our deep space monitoring stations detected something that made my blood freeze. Yes, a massive energy signature approaching our system at impossible speed. It's not faster than light, but close enough that it shouldn't have been achievable by a species that had barely reached their own moon a century ago. "Marshal," I reported, trying to keep the "I told you so" out of my voice, "the humans are here, and they're not traveling in primitive ships. The vessel that entered our system was unlike anything in our databases. It wasn't built, it was grown. Somehow, the humans had created a living ship that adapted and evolved as it traveled. Our scientists spent days trying to understand how they'd achieved biotechnology that was centuries beyond their apparent development level. The answer came in the form of a transmission from the human vessel." General Kane's voice filled our command center. But it wasn't the same casual confidence I'd heard on Earth. This was something harder, more focused. "Supreme War Marshal Iron Maw. This is General Kane of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. We've come to discuss your species' recent visit to our world." Iron Maw activated the visual communication, apparently expecting to intimidate these primitive creatures with his imposing presence. What appeared on the screen made several of my staff officers step backward in shock. General Kane looked different. His species had always been adaptable, but this was something else. His eyes held a predatory focus that reminded me uncomfortably of our own hunting instincts. His movements were more precise, more efficient. And there was something else, something that made my combat-trained mind scream warnings. He looked like he was enjoying this. "General," Iron Maw said, his voice carrying all the authority of someone who'd never actually been punched in the face, "you're in violation of Kytharan space. Surrender immediately. And we might consider allowing your species to continue existing." Kane smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. "Marshal, we didn't come here to surrender. We came here to return the education you provided us. We've learned so much about interstellar warfare in the past 6 months. We'd like to show you what we've discovered." Before Iron Maw could respond, our sensor arrays detected something impossible. The human ship was dividing. It's not breaking apart, but deliberately splitting into smaller vessels, each one perfectly adapted for a different type of combat. In the span of minutes, a single exploration vessel had become a complete battle fleet. "As you can see," Kane continued, his voice maintaining that terrifying calm, "we've made some improvements to your basic ship design. We found your technology rather primitive, too focused on brute force, not enough emphasis on adaptability. War Counselor Hicks activated our defensive systems, deploying the orbital defense platforms that had protected our homeworld for over 1,000 years. Human, you're facing weapons that have never been defeated. Your crude vessels won't survive the first bombardment. Actually, Kane said, and I could hear that familiar note of amusement, we've been studying your defensive systems for the past 3 months. We've had plenty of time to prepare. The human fleet began its approach, and I watched in growing horror as they demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible. They weren't just avoiding our weapons, they were analyzing them, learning from each shot, adapting their shields and movements to counter our most advanced technology. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was how they were doing it. Each human vessel fought differently, as if they were learning from the experiences of the others in real time. When one ship discovered an effective counter to our plasma cannons, all the others immediately adopted the same technique. When another found a weakness in our shield generators, the entire fleet exploited it simultaneously. "Marshal," I said, my voice tight with barely controlled panic, "we need to evacuate the civilian population. This isn't going to be a battle. It's going to be a lesson, and we're not going to be the teachers. Impossible." Iron Maw snarled. "No species adapts that quickly. No species learns that efficiently." "This one does," I replied, watching as the human fleet systematically dismantled our outer defenses. "This is what they do. They don't just fight, they evolve. Every challenge makes them stronger." The first phase of the human attack lasted exactly 47 minutes. In that time, they neutralized defense systems that had taken our ancestors centuries to develop. They didn't just destroy our weapons, they improved them, turning our own technology against us with modifications that our engineers couldn't even understand. General Kane's voice returned to our communications. "Phase 1 complete. Marshal, we're ready to begin the real demonstration." "What do you want?" Iron Maw demanded, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that might have been fear. "We want you to understand something," Kane replied. "Your species has been conquering worlds for millennia. You've perfected the art of overwhelming less developed civilizations. But you've never faced a species that gets better at warfare through warfare itself." The human fleet began deploying something that our sensors couldn't identify, small, seemingly insignificant pods that spread throughout our system like spores. Within hours, we realized what they were: mobile learning stations. Each pod was observing our military responses, analyzing our tactics, and transmitting that information back to the human fleet. "You see," Kane continued, "we've spent the last 6 months studying not just your technology, but your military history. Every conquest you've ever made, every tactic you've ever used, every weakness you've ever exploited. We've analyzed all of it." "Impossible," War Counselor Hicks whispered. "Our military archives are classified beyond your capabilities." Kane corrected. Past tense. "We've been in your systems for months. Did you really think a species that mastered global information networks wouldn't be able to hack your communications?" The screens around our command center began displaying classified Kytharan military files. Our most secret strategies, our hidden weapons, our emergency protocols, all of it was there. But it had been annotated with human improvements. They hadn't just stolen our military secrets, they'd made them better. "We've also been studying your species biology," Kane continued. "Your psychological profiles, your combat instincts, your cultural weaknesses. We know exactly how your minds work because we've been fighting creatures like you for our entire evolutionary history." Supreme War Marshal Iron Maw finally understood what we were facing. "You're not here to conquer us. You're here to replace us." "Replace you?" Kane sounded genuinely puzzled. "Marshal, we don't want to replace you. We want to improve you. Your species has potential, but you've been stagnating for centuries, too comfortable, too confident, too convinced of your own superiority." The human fleet began the second phase of their demonstration. Instead of destroying our remaining defenses, they began upgrading them. Our weapons became more efficient, our shields more adaptive, our tactical systems more responsive. In real time, they were showing us how our own technology could be perfected. This is what we learned from your invasion, Kane explained. Warfare isn't about overwhelming your enemies. It's about understanding them so completely that you can make them better at fighting you, and then becoming better at fighting them. I watched as human technicians, somehow transported directly onto our command platforms, began working alongside our engineers. They weren't conquering us, they were teaching us, showing us how to fight at their level. But here's the thing, Kane continued, and now his voice carried a note of genuine respect. We know that making you better will make us better. Competition drives evolution. Stagnation leads to extinction. Over the following days, something unprecedented happened. The humans didn't occupy our world or demand tribute. Instead, they established what they called collaborative combat academies. Kytharan warriors trained alongside human soldiers, learning techniques that combined our natural advantages with their adaptive strategies. At first, our military leadership resisted. The idea of learning from a species we'd tried to conquer was humiliating. But as our warriors began demonstrating capabilities they'd never possessed before, resistance faded into grudging respect. Lieutenant Kytharan Shadowfang, who had survived the Earth campaign, became one of the first Kytharan officers to master human adaptive tactics. Commander, she reported after a joint training exercise, they're not just teaching us to fight better, they're teaching us to think better, to see patterns we never noticed before. And what do they get in return? I asked. Practice, she replied. Every time we improve, they have to improve to stay ahead of us. It's like they're using us to evolve themselves. General Kane visited our homeworld personally 3 months after the initial demonstration. He looked different again, more refined, as if the challenges of teaching us had somehow made him more than he'd been before. Commander Thornspike, he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of respect, we wanted to thank you. Thank me? HFY for the introduction to interstellar warfare. Before your invasion, we were just fighting each other. Now we're fighting the universe itself. And we're getting better at it. I looked at this creature who had systematically dismantled everything we thought we knew about warfare, and I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. We hadn't invaded a world of prey. We had awakened a species of predators who had been waiting for a worthy challenge. What happens now? I asked. Kane smiled. And this time it was genuinely friendly. Now we explore the galaxy together. We've detected 47 other species that might benefit from our educational approach. Some of them have been stagnating even longer than your people. You're planning to invade other worlds? Invade? Kane looked genuinely offended. Commander, we don't invade. We improve. There's a difference. As I watched the human fleet prepare to leave our system, accompanied by a full squadron of upgraded Kytharan vessels, I understood what we had unleashed. We thought we were conquering a primitive world. Instead, we had introduced a species of evolutionary predators to the galaxy. The humans hadn't just defeated us, they had made us better at being defeated. And in doing so, they had made themselves better at everything else. General Kane's final transmission came as the joint fleet prepared to depart. Commander, we've left detailed improvement plans for your remaining military systems. We estimate you'll be ready for advanced combat scenarios within 2 years. We look forward to seeing what you accomplish. The transmission ended, and I stared out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, 47 other species were about to learn the same lesson we had. That war isn't about destruction. It's about evolution, and humans were very, very good at evolution. The Kytharan Empire had spent millennia believing we were the apex predators of the galaxy. We were wrong. We were just the first species to accidentally provide the real apex predators with advanced combat training, and somehow I suspected they were going to thank us for it.